Thank you, Minister. We will now go to our round of questioning, and we will begin with Ms. Remple-Garner for 6 minutes. Ms. Remple-Garner, you can please begin.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I'm aware of the magnitude of the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. As the wife of a U.S. veteran who served in Afghanistan, this issue cuts pretty close to home. My questions relate to Recommendation 3 of the report and the creation of an emergency mechanism to enable fast evacuations of person in a crisis zone. I'm trying to ascertain if one already formally existed but wasn't disclosed to Parliament. Evidence exists that a parliamentarian and others within the government felt that the government was so woefully unprepared to evacuate persons from Afghanistan that they resorted to issuing fraudulent documents and used a process by which political staff and a senator got to choose who got on evacuation planes. With nearly 1 million Afghans who expressed interest in being allowed to Canada, this undermined the fairness of Canada's immigration policies while putting Afghans like the family of my constituent at risk. My constituents were involved in this, as you know, and will be subject to some of my questions. Minister, on July 26, you wrote me a response to a letter I wrote on July 7th. The subject of the letter related to a family of Afghan nationals that my office was assisting that had allegedly been issued official documentation stating that they had been granted a visa to enter Canada. They received this documentation from Senator Mary Lou McPhedran. In your response, you stated that these letters were inauthentic and that your department had undertaken a review of the matter. In your investigation, was it determined whether the minister, at the time, any IRCC departmental official, or any of the IRCC minister's office staff ever advised any third parties, including ministerial office staff or parliamentarians, to issue official travel documentation to Afghan nationals for the purposes of allowing them access to evacuation flights or to otherwise gain entry into Canada?
Thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it, and thank you for the letter that you sent me this past summer. The issue that you first, the preamble to your question touched on whether there was an emergency evacuation strategy that was available and not used in the instance. No, there was an effort made in that instance to move people as quickly as possible through the use of these facilitation letters. I do think it's worth exploring, perhaps in a separate question, what we should do going forward to build surge capacity to respond in emergencies. The facilitation letters that you're referring to were issued by the government at the time for people who were intended to come into the program.
I appreciate you giving background. I'm just wondering if your investigation into my letter ever determined whether any of your staff, the department officials, political staff, advised any third party, including parliamentarians and other political staff, to issue these facilitation letters?
No, the investigation internal to IRCC concluded that the letters it issued did not come officially from the Government of Canada, but there was no information I received as a result of that investigation along the lines you've suggested.
Senator McPhedran asserted in the other place this week that she issued these visa facilitation letters in coordination with the former Chief of Staff to the Defence Minister, George Young, and a group of persons who included former Cabinet Minister Marianne Monsef. Did your investigation ascertain whether or not her allegation in the Senate was true?
No, but it's important that we understand that IRCC is very good at detecting the use of documents that are unofficial, but we don't have functionality built into this department to be investigating political staff and parliamentarians. That's why when we concluded that the letters at issue were not officially offered by the Government of Canada, we shared with law enforcement, not to make an allegation, by the way, against any particular individual, but to put the documents in the hands of someone who had the ability to investigate as they saw would be fair.
You mentioned that IRCC has the capacity to detect inauthentic documentation. My office was in coordination with your department as early as August 2021, showing them copies of this documentation. Why wasn't it detected that it was inauthentic until after I wrote you the letter in July of last year?
The cases that you rose with me regarding your constituents actually helped inform some of the process. The reality was we first became aware of a media report about this time last year, late January, I believe, that started asking some questions tied to a particular organization. That's when we started the investigation.
Thank you.
It took a number of months to reach the conclusion, but your outreach actually helped facilitate the investigation.
Thank you. As part of your investigation, and there's numerous media articles that have talked about how Senator McPhedran's letters helped facilitate people into the country. How many persons were gained access into Canada using Senator McPhedran's letters?
None that I am aware of, and I think it's really important that we understand that the facilitation letters were used only to allow people to clear Taliban checkpoints and to move throughout the Hamid Karzai International Airport. Even people who received legitimate letters from the Government of Canada still had to go through the ordinary application process to qualify for the program. I'm not aware of anyone who's accessed Canada on the basis of these letters.
The letter I'm in possession of states that the person who it was granted to says they've been granted a visa to enter Canada. Ms. Fox, has your department begun an investigation on how many persons were granted entry into Canada using inauthentic letters issued by a parliamentarian and anyone else that Senator McFedrin raised in the Senate last week?
Thank you for the question. I think what I would say is that these were not, the facilitation letters were just that, facilitation letters that had the word visa in it, but it was to get through checkpoints, and visas were issued to our clients.
Should I have been issuing fake visas to get my constituents into Canada? And do you believe that the people who have these letters now should be allowed access into Canada?
I think that it is really important as a department when we issue official Government of Canada letters that they are used officially, and therefore any time that we get a suggestion that there is an inauthentic letter in circulation, we have to conduct a review.
And Minister, you do realize the message this sends, right? All of us here have had constituents who are trying to flee war zones. They didn't have the luxury of getting these letters. With this family, I worked for a year to try and find out what was going on. Do you believe that the letters Senator McFedrin used, and we know that there are people who got into Canada through media reports using these letters, for those that are holding them and that are in Afghanistan, do you believe that they should be allowed access to Canada? And is this sending a message that parliamentarians were the system's so broken that we should be issuing fake visas to get people into the country?
Madam Chair, I see time has run out. I would be happy to respond, but should I wait to? I'll take.
Maybe you'll get an opportunity to respond in the next round.
Okay,
we'll come back
Ms. Remple-Garner, I'd be happy to respond should you have more time, because I think this is a very important issue to dig into.
We will now proceed to Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you will have 6 minutes.
Thank